morning to all of you, and thank you, sir, for such a nice introduction. Today I am going to present a paper on surrogates in India, and I have titled it like Blood, Sweat, Money and Dummy Dummies. The authors of this papers are Jaikant Singh, myself, and 3 others. In this conference, from the day one, we are talking about the sexual and reproductive rights. And the reproductive rights are mainly focusing on contraception, abortion, sexual violence, and maternal mortality. And reproductive rights also take care of infertility. ICPD Program of Action states the aim should be to assist couples and individuals to achieve their reproductive goals. Worldwide, very fewer scientific studies focus on infertility and related treatments. An analysis of 47 DHS countries revealed that around 186 million women are infertile in the age group of 15 to 49, and this 186 million is a big number. Post-1980, medical advancement made possible to overcome infertility problems through that sperm donation, embryo donation, and with the help of surrogates. India has been the popular destination for medical tourism. At today's date, I can cite there are 3,000 clinics that are performing surrogacy, and the source is National Commission on Women. Why India is a popular destination? Now this we need to know. In India, the surrogacy can happen at a very low price in comparison to the Western countries. There are no laws, there are no laws. There are only ICMR guidelines on which these surrogacy can be done. And it is a very easy to arrange a surrogate. They have a language advantage because in India there are many people who speak English. Availability of good surrogate. What I mean by good surrogate is that in India women rarely smoke and drink. So it's very good, means it's very much possible that the intended genetic mothers and fathers can get a good surrogate. Okay, surrogates are exposed to gross human rights violations. Now why I am saying this is that when somebody agrees to be a surrogate, there is a long procedure. It's not like that she wants to be a surrogate and it's easily the embryo is transferred, and like there is a long procedure. She gets a lot of injections for developing artificial hormones, and there are many rights that are violated. Studies are mainly focusing on patient's experience, and little is known about the surrogates. So the major question here is who choose to be a surrogate? Means who is this woman who is taking surrogacy, who is renting her womb for others' baby? Is it a free will? Means she is doing by her own will, she is interested to do, or do they decide freely to become a surrogate? And what are the reasons and motivations that these women choose to be a surrogate? The literature is torn on Indian surrogates' demographic and socio-economic profile of these women. So the objective of this paper is to understand the demographic and socio-economic profile of the surrogates in India from the available published literature. We carried out a systematic review, which is a form of literature review that collects and looks at multiple studies. Now the methods. For the systematic review, we decided the search terms, the databases, and the search strategies. Recognizing that the empirical and sparse literature on surrogacy includes diverse terminologies, we were purposefully inclusive in our initial search terms. We conducted searches in a broad range of databases, including JSTOR, PubMed, Web of Science, Springer Link, and Project Muse, and kept the language of search as English. And the first broad search yielded 2399 articles. Our search terms were surrogates India, surrogacy statistics India, surrogates demographics India, surrogates characteristics India, surrogates demographic characteristics India, surrogate socio-economic characteristics India, surrogate mothers or women and India, status of surrogates, surrogacy in India, profile of surrogates, surrogacy and in India, who are the surrogates in India, surrogates and society and India, surrogates and social exclusion or discrimination. So these were the broad search terms that we used for our literature review search. Inclusion and exclusion criteria. The search was conducted in multiple steps. In the first step, we limited our search of databases to articles that were published between 2000 to 2015 to capture the recent work in this area, since it is an emerging issue for a country like us. In the second step, articles were screened based on the title and abstract, providing information about surrogates and their characteristics. In this step, we retrieved the full text articles of selected articles. Now this is the flow chart, how we went to find these articles that we finally reviewed. First of all, 2399 potentially eligible articles were identified. After that, only 71 eligible articles were hand-screened, and the eligibility criteria was surrogates in India, means only Indian surrogates should be there, articles that are published between 2000 and 2015 in English language, and the articles should have any information on demographics and socio-economic background of the surrogates. After that, only 26 articles were selected which provided us this socio-economic and demographic information. Finally, in these 26 articles, only 9 articles provided information on quantitative information on demographic, social and economic characteristics, and from the rest of 17 articles, they were the qualitative articles, and we extracted the narratives that informed us about any of the social and economic background of that surrogates. Data analysis, one-stage approach which combined all individual participant data in a single meta-analysis have been performed, and our total sample of surrogates is 78. Data was entered into MS Excel and then transferred into IBM SPSS 22 for further analysis. Univariate and descriptive statistics were performed, and narratives pertaining to socio-economic and demographic characteristics of the surrogates are also presented in the findings. Now let's look at the results. Most of the surrogates women were in the age group of 26 to 30. Maximum surrogates were belonging to the Hindu religion, followed by Christian and then Muslims. Marital status, most of them were married, and 8% of surrogate mothers were separated, 4% of surrogate mothers were widow, and almost 51% of surrogate women had 2 biological children. Now the socio-economic profile says 38%, 39% women had primary or middle level education, and around 16% were illiterate. Now you can see that most of these surrogate women are either illiterate or having very less education, means either primary or middle. Only 16% women had high school and above. Occupation, most of the women were either housewife or unskilled laborers. Monthly family income, this is a very important thing to see here. See, 32% of surrogate mothers had a family income of less than $50 and 18% had less than, means around $51 to $100. Now let's look at the selected narratives that will tell us about this socio-economic profile or background of the surrogate mothers. Now from Amrita Pandey 2015, this surrogate mother Parvati, the names are not the real ones. Let's see what she said. I am doing this, renting womb, basically for my daughters. Both will be old enough to be sent to school next year. I want them to be educated, maybe become teachers or air hostesses. I don't want them to grow up and be like me, illiterate and desperate. Now see this surrogate woman's psychology here to take up surrogacy. She wants to make her daughters educated. That's why she is doing this surrogacy. She don't want them to be, uneducated and desperate for money and all. So she's doing all this for her daughters. Now next narrative is also from a study by Amrita Pandey in 2009, and it is of a genetic mother, Rita. It will tell us about how people want certain religion women to go for surrogacy for them. So she said, I was actually looking for someone who is a Hindu from a good culture and preferably a Brahmin. Brahmins are upper caste Hindus. Hasn't it scientifically been proven that what a woman does when she is pregnant affects the child? So if a surrogate does puja means prayers, a Hindu form of prayers, when she is pregnant, the baby can hear her and be blessed by the prayer. But at that time, no other surrogate except Salma was available. Salma is a Muslim. Even though Salma is a Muslim, I'm glad we decided to start this relationship. Now we have become like sisters. No, actually she is more than a sister for me. Not even a sister would do what she is doing for me. But you see, at first she wanted a Hindu to be the surrogate because she is from a Hindu religion. So definitely religion is playing an important role in when people select a surrogate. Now next is from a study by Gupta 2015. It is a narrative by surrogate mother Shaka. She says, I don't think there is anything wrong with surrogacy. We need the money. I am emphasizing on this. We need the money and they need the child. The important thing is that I am not doing anything wrong for the money, not stealing or killing anyone, and I am not even sleeping with anyone. Next narrative is also from Amrita Pandey 2015 article, and this is by surrogate mother Ramya. And she says, my husband is quote and unquote unemployed. But he's a very good person. He takes care of the children. He stays at home mostly so he knows what to feed them. Most husbands would not agree to let their wife do this, be a surrogate. But he agreed. I am very lucky. We had no problems with getting the surrogacy contract because his history is so clean. He does not smoke or drink. We are Christians. He converted from Hinduism and used to work in a mission earlier. Now here I would like to emphasize, like, his history is clean. Before taking up surrogacy, the history of the surrogate mother and her husband is checked up. Like they are not involved into anything like extramarital affairs. They do not have STI. They do not have HIV. They do not have hepatitis. Means whole history is checked, and then only they get the surrogacy contract. So these four narratives tell us about, the socio-economic profile of these women, from which profile they come from. Now discussion. In this, first of all, I'll discuss the summary of key findings. The average family income of these surrogate mothers is around rupees 4,480. I can say that only $60 approximately monthly average family income. Majority of surrogate mothers were Hindu, and maybe this can be because in Hindu religion surrogacy is allowed, and as per date Christianity and Muslim religion is not allowing for surrogacy. And education, majority had education up to primary or middle level. Majority of surrogate mothers were housewives and their husbands were employed in informal sector. The mean age of women is 30 years. Number of children, mode of surrogate means maximum of surrogate mothers had at least 2 children. All of the studies have shown that surrogate mothers are from very low socio-economic background. And age is specified for surrogacy, means in our ICMR guidelines it is said that only women between age 21 to 35 should take up surrogacy, but when we did the literature review and all, we found out that 1/5 of our sample was out of this age group, means somewhere this is getting violated. And now the limitations of this paper, these results cannot be generalized. Publication, availability and selection biases are a potential concern for meta-analysis of individual participant data. Means whenever we do some meta-analysis, definitely it is the selection are biased. Means sometimes we don't get certain articles that are paid, and maybe they contain some other information also that we may get. So selection biases are bound to happen when we do some meta-analysis and all. And very few articles gave information on demographic data. Most of the published study focused on a particular part of country, our India, that is Anand in Gujarat, which is called as the surrogacy capital of India. One of the limitations is we are dependent on what the literature observed, and this is the key bias. I will conclude by the findings reveal that most of the surrogate mothers belong to poor socio-economic backgrounds. So now this is the point. We need to think that are the poor women bearing children for the rich women? Most of the surrogate mothers were Hindu, maybe due to the fact that Hindu religion allows for surrogacy. And nearly 80% of the surrogates with 2 or more children entered into an agreement for surrogacy. So maybe it is possible that they are advised that a woman is likely to enter into surrogacy industry after her desired size of the family is attained. There is a further scope for the research. A detailed information on the socio-economic characteristics of the woman who ever took surrogacy can be surveyed, or maybe government can track the records, means the woman, whoever takes up surrogacy, her information should be updated to some government organization so that we should know who are these women exactly who are taking up surrogacy. And how religion and caste play an important role in surrogacy can be further studied. Now these are the references, articles that were reviewed. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Annie. So the next speaker is Jacob Toga. Yeah, he's a researcher for Family Planning New Zealand's International Program Unit. His work is typically focused on improving access to family planning services in the Pacific region. He has a particular interest in the Pacific Island country of Kiribati. Jacob holds a Master of Science Geography with a thesis looking at the spatial access to her service in New Zealand. So his title is Reducing Unmet Need for Family Planning in Kiribati, a cost-benefit analysis. So I would like to invite Jacob to present.
Great, fantastic. So my name is Jacob Dove. I'm from Family Planning in New Zealand, and I'm presenting the results of part of a program that we did in the Pacific Island nation of Kiribati about a year and a half ago, and as part of a wider program working with the IPPF member association in Kiribati, the Kiribati Family Health Association, around improving capacity and creating an environment in which advocacy for family planning could be successful. And so this part that I'm presenting was a cost-benefit analysis that we provided to the government to assist in making the case for investment in family planning. So the general goal of the project was to identify the costs and the health and the social benefits and the economic benefits of investing in family planning. Now, those of us that work in family planning, we know that in most countries, in all countries, family planning should be a very, very good investment. In public health circles, it's often said that family planning is the most cost-effective public health intervention there is. In saying that, however, when you do advocacy work, you need to be able to apply the data to the situation. It's no good going to the government and saying, actually, we know family planning is a good investment. We have no idea about for your country, but internationally it's a good investment. That's never quite strong enough to make the case. So what we did as part of this project was to present the government of Kiribati with a cost-benefit analysis that we had done, a simple cost-benefit analysis we've done, to just to really make it more appealing, make it more real to the context. So we've heard a lot in this conference about how to advocate to governments and to politicians, we need to really highlight the costs, and that's very much what we've done. The costs and the benefits. We also wanted to assist the government of Kiribati to set realistic population targets and reproductive health goals. I mean, often we might see in developing countries very, very optimistic goals set around family planning. Goals such as contraceptive prevalence rates far and above what we would see in developed countries, usually from policymakers who are perhaps not familiar with family planning making the policies. So we wanted to help assist with that as well. And generally contribute to the evidence base. I mean, the Pacific Island nations is generally a very research-poor environment. They're small populations, it's quite challenging to do research, and it's quite hard to get money to do research. So this program was funded by the New Zealand Aid Program and actually replicated previous studies we had done in the Solomon Islands and Vanuatu. So firstly, just a little bit about Kiribati. It's a small Pacific Island country. It's probably wrong to say it's a small country. It's a vast country. It covers a huge amount of the Pacific Ocean, but the habitable landmass and the number of islands in which people live on is very small. So the population when we did the study a couple of years back was 103,000. Now it's somewhere about 110. So Kiribati, the reason, well, one of the reasons we're in Kiribati is Kiribati has population challenges. The country overall has a rapidly growing population. From the 105, 110,000 it is currently, it's expected to increase to over 200,000 in the next 25 years. Within this, there are very high adolescent fertility rates and more specifically very, very high urban growth rates at 4.4% per annum. And the capital of Kiribati is an atoll, quite a small atoll, called South Tarawa. And South Tarawa is already one of the most densely populated regions in the world. Geographers among us might be able to interpret that, but that population density is equivalent to most major cities, except most houses in Kiribati are one story. Most buildings in Kiribati are one story, so it's an incredibly densely populated area. And with this becomes very, very strained natural resources, water in particular, and then all the flow-on effects with sanitation, and that leads to very strained health services. So in particular, waterborne diseases are very prevalent, and the lack of arable land for growing vegetables means diet's quite hard, and there are lots of NCDs as well. Within the health needs, very, very high sexual and reproductive health needs. So the maternal mortality ratio is officially 169. With the small population, it's very hard to tell. A single maternal death is equivalent to about 50 on that. So it's not very clear, but that was the number that we had, so the number we worked with. Nearly 1 in 20 children die in infancy, and about 50% of births are classified as high risk. Part of the situation in Kiribati is that there is, when we were doing the study in particular, poor access to family planning. So the contraceptive prevalence rate, the modern contraceptive prevalence rate rather, is 18%, which is, as far as I'm aware, the lowest in the Asia Pacific region. It also has a very high unmet need for family planning. So there's a woman that have been identified through the DHS that wish to space or limit their children but are not currently using contraception. That 28% we believe is quite an optimistic figure, but again it is the figure we have and so the figure we used for this study. And the other major thing in Kiribati is it's a very, very challenging research environment. So it's a data poor environment. There is very limited routine data collection. With the low population, there is simply not the economies of scale for the Ministry of Health and the other agencies to really do the routine data collection that we see in other areas. And with the small population, there is limited incentive for multilaterals to come in and do research. So the outcome of this is it is a very data poor environment and a very hard place to do something like a cost-benefit analysis. So the way we got around that was we used a policy modelling system which was developed by USAID, which allows for analyses in data poor environments. And so it was developed by the Futures Institute, which some of you might know, and funded under the USAID Health Policy Initiative. So the program allows us to bring in 3 interconnected modules, DEMPROG, FAMPLAN, and I don't know what happened. DEMPROG, FAMPLAN, and RAPID, which allow us to bring in reproductive health indicators, costings for family planning and family planning indicators, and limited economic indicators. So for the study, we modelled 3 scenarios. The first, which was our baseline or constant scenario, which was unmet need for family planning stays constant. In this scenario, we would assume that there would be no increase in contraceptive prevalence because none of the unmet need would be met. So we would be sitting still at 22% contraceptive prevalence and 28% unmet need at the end of the projection period. Or a slow improvement scenario in which all unmet needs were met by 2050, or a fast improvement scenario where all unmet needs, the 28%, would be met by 2020. And so for the modelling, we projected all the scenarios over the time frame of 40 years, 2010 to 2050. But we just used the data from the period 2010 to 2025 to limit limit some of the assumptions that we used. So the main thing, and I really want to do this before we go any further, is just think about some of the limitations in this study. The first, which is the one that is really obvious to people that work in family planning in particular, is that the models don't take into account changes in demand for family planning. In particular, they don't take into account increases in unmet need for family planning. So typically what we will see is as more people start to use family planning services, the unmet need for family planning will typically rise. As more people are using it, more people hear about people using it, more people wish to use it. On a more economics and demography perspective, the family planning costing estimates only address the direct costs of providing family planning, in particular the staff costs, like salary, time, etc., and the commodity costs of all the RH commodities required in a clinical or outpatient administration of family planning. And so there is no consideration of demand generation activities in here. Now this is a function of us presenting this to the government and showing them what they were paying for. So in Kiribati, the government has a responsibility around commodity ordering, and this is what we were presenting to them. The saving estimates also only consider the health and education sector savings that are related to changes in population between the models. So just quickly, as it's a data poor environment, we took data from all the sources we could. I won't go through them individually, but pretty much most of the data came from the national censuses or the DHS. We were lucky enough, in fact we chose the timing of this, was when the 2010 census data released, so we used that as the starting point for this project. We got all our costings from consultation with the Ministry of Health and the Kiribati Family Health Association, the two providers of family planning. So we had a relatively in-depth interview process where we worked out what the approximate cost would be. Now, one of the main assumptions that we had to bring in was to work out how the contraceptive method mix would change over time. So what this means is if 22% of people are using family planning, what percent of those are using each method? And as that changes over time, we would expect that to change. We would expect the modern method prevalence to perhaps go up within that 22% and the traditional to go down. So we had a reference group of experts from the region and from the country, RH experts, that considered this and provided feedback and allowed us to build an assumption of what the method mix would be. So yeah, as I said, we used the data from the period 2010 to 2025. And we compared the impact of the fast improvement and the slow improvement to the constant scenario. So unmet need being met at varying speeds to no change in unmet need. All benefits and all costs were discounted at 3% as per the WHO guidelines, and we did one-way sensitivity analyses on key data points and assumptions just to see that we weren't getting massive variations from our assumptions. And all costs are in Australian dollars. So, my apologies about the table. We've got a lot of data, so it's quite hard to show it all in graphs. The first is just basically showing what happened in the models. In 2010, we have a contraceptive prevalence rate of 22%. In the baseline scenario, it remains 22% in 2025, whereas in the fast improvement scenario, it's 50%. The 28% unmet need plus the 22% current users. And you can see the effect this has on the number, would have on the number of users from 3,200 in 2010 to 10,000 in 2025 under the fast improvement. So, I mean, you know, this is a considerable change. There's a small numbers, but a considerable increase in the proportion of users and the raw number of users. And also, it's probably worth noting that in the baseline or constant scenario, we're effectively doubling the number of users from what we would expect. So just to look at this quickly, we can see how the contraceptive prevalence changes in our scenario. In red is the constant, it remains constant. In green, we see what we would expect through consultation with our research groups, the uptake of family planning would be if it were funded. In terms of the sexual and maternal and infant health indicators, we would see, we would expect that the total number of pregnancies with the changes in the method mix and the discounting would go down. We would expect some improvement in the current situation. We would expect far more improvement in the fast improvement scenario. Unintended pregnancies in particular would fall to a fifth in the fast improvement scenario as what they would be in the baseline. And births with avoidable risk and the number of infant deaths would both be halved compared to the baseline scenario. So again, just to see it visually, this is what the impact would be on, what the expected impact or the projected impact would be on infant deaths. And a huge change. Now, regarding the population indicators, the obvious difference would be a decrease in the total fertility rate. Kiribati has quite a high total fertility rate of about 3.8, and this would fall under the fast improvement scenario to around 2.6, so over 1 child per woman. The adolescent fertility rate as well, we would expect to half compared to 2010 levels. And the population between the two scenarios would increase by about, in the constant scenario, it would be about 15,000 people higher than in the fast improvement scenario. So again, these are small numbers, but when you think about the size of the Kiribati population, this is quite a massive change. And with this lower population, particularly among younger people, particularly over this period with fewer youth born or fewer children born, it would have a large impact on the dependency ratio. And we can see here what that looks like in terms of population. There would be a considerable change. And so, and again with the population, just to visualise it, we can see where the population change would be. In red we have what would be the constant scenario to green in the middle. In Kiribati, the population pyramid is a pyramid. It's very much widest at the base, and with it meeting unmet need, we would see that taper in a lot, and we would see it become more sustainable and hopefully an improvement in the dependency ratio. So I won't go through these because there's quite a lot of them, but this is just measuring the economic impact. So the first is the GDP. So we would, between the baseline and fast improvement scenario, according to our packages and according to our modelling, we would expect to see, all things equal, an increase of around $150 per person in annual GDP. Unfortunately, that's not a lot of money, but again, that's 10%, a 10% increase in GDP per capita. And the other ones are merely the number of each of the resources that would be required between the scenario to provide the same level of education or the same level of health. With the changing population, in the baseline scenario, for example, we would need 825 teachers, whereas in the fast improvement scenario, that would be much lower at 590. And that's the same for many health and education resources. And this is where we would see the public sector savings. The government would have to spend less compared to the baseline to achieve the same level of health or education. So in terms of the cost results, so the cost to provide that level of family planning would be, in the constant scenario, we would expect to fund that number of women to access services would be around $360,000 Australian dollars. Under the fast improvement scenario, that would be over twice as high. So this is a large increase in the amount of spending required by the government to achieve, increase of around 450,000 Australian dollars. However, the health and education savings, under the constant scenario, we would expect the government to have to spend about $377 million to provide the health budget and the education budget. Under the fast improvement scenario, we would expect that to be reduced by 18.8, close to 19 million. So it would be a huge net benefit in direct education and health savings. For reference, the annual health budget of Kiribati is about $14 to $15 million. So this would be the equivalent of a saving of 1 year's health budget over 15 years, which so these numbers aren't big, but again, this is very big for the Kiribati context. And just visually to see the difference between these two scenarios, the costs are in blue, the savings are in red. It really is quite vast. So I won't show you these now, but these are just the results of the sensitivity analyses. We didn't see any major variations between any of the assumptions we made. I mean, there were variations between the data points, but they were not that big. So, just in summary, the total cumulative expenditure over the 15-year period we would expect to be about 810,000 Australian dollars. Doesn't sound like much money. It is quite a large amount of money in the Kiribati context, but it would be 450,000 more than the baseline scenario. However, on the benefits side, we would see huge sexual and maternal health benefits. In particular, the averting the over 900 maternal and infant deaths in 15 years. In terms of economic benefits, with planned pregnancies, we would expect higher educational attainment and economic participation for women. We would also expect a demographic dividend of some sort. With the dependency ratio decline and the accelerated, or we would expect or hope to see accelerated economic growth. And the total savings in the health and education sector would be $18.8 million, a return of $23 on every dollar spent. And lastly, the environmental benefits, though we haven't gone into this here, would obviously be huge. There'd be a considerably less drain on the very scarce natural resources of Kiribati. So we produced a report to provide to the Kiribati government, and within that, these are probably the two recommendations that most apply to this. Kiribati does require an increased and long-term financial commitment to meet unmet need for family planning. However, we believe that family planning should be prioritised in maternal health and reproductive health and child health and population policies. As something as a footnote, many of the recommendations that we made in this report did make it into Kiribati government policy, and they're in the stage of embracing some of those. And again, it's, as we've heard so often through this conference, it is probably a matter of finding the funding source and lobbying some politicians to free up some budget to make this happen, but we are very hopeful. I think one last thing I should say is how this applies to this audience. Obviously, the populations in Asia are much larger than what we see in the Pacific. So perhaps when you're thinking about this and the application of this to you, it's probably good to compare this research to something that could be done on a district level in Asia, in your community or in your town or your city. It's very much the scale in which this would apply. Thank you very much.
So thank you very much for two speakers. So could you please come over to sit here for the discussion? So we still have 20 minutes. Yeah. So the floor is open for your discussion, please. Yeah, Dr. Rima.
I'd like to thank the two speakers for very good presentations. For the surrogacy paper in India, I have three questions. The ICMR guidelines, they are still guidelines. Is there any plan to make that into an act in Parliament? I thought there was some plans earlier on. And in your statement, you said almost all surrogate mothers were married. That means not all, almost all. Does it mean that ICMR guidelines do allow unmarried mothers to be a surrogate mother? Because it wasn't all, it was almost all. And you highlighted the fact that these women were in poverty, they wanted children to have better education. The only conclusion I can draw from that is it is poverty that is making them do this. And to get out of poverty, there are many things one can do besides lending or renting your womb. Does this then imply that doing surrogacy is the easiest way to get money? Is it the most profitable way to make money? How much does a woman charge for the services? I like to know. I suspect it is one of the easiest because there's no law, and one of the most profitable way to make money. Those are my three questions. On the Kiribati study, Jacob, I have two questions and one comment. My question is, this study Kiribati followed up on Vanuatu and Solomon Islands. Were the results comparable between these three countries? My second question is, I'm quite surprised that the population of Kiribati is actually increasing, and that's mainly due to high adolescent fertility rate. Is it therefore a fact that there is very little out-migration from Kiribati, unlike Nauru to Vanuatu to Kilau? Because the population of Kilau is like, when I was in my Manila office, it was 1,000 or something, and then it became, was 2,000, became 1,008 or something like that. So is there very little out-migration from Kiribati? And my comment is, when I started the adolescent sexual reproductive health for the South Pacific Islands, Kiribati gave me a very encouraging trend. They were the first country in the South Pacific community to begin to consider, I think they did allow oral contraceptives for the unmarried. So that was something very, very positive in the Kiribati. So I don't know whether you're aware of that, but even then, adolescent fertility rate is still very high.
Thank you so much for the question, ma'am. There is no Indian law that governs the practice of surrogacy. There are only ICMR guidelines. And we had, first of all, we had guidelines in 2005, and recently they keep updating it, but there is no particular law.
Is there a plan to make that into a law?
Right now, I'm not very sure about this. And as per ICMR guidelines, no unmarried women can take surrogacy. And regarding this poverty part, even this was our concern to go through this paper and do this analysis, that we also wanted to know that who are these women and why they are doing this surrogacy. Means, is there social and economic background forcing them to take up surrogacy? And yes, they get some, these women are mostly illiterate and either housewives or in informal sector that came up through our findings also. And maybe if they will take up some other job, they will not be paid as much as they can be paid in this surrogacy. And around the cost of surrogacy in India that the hospitals charge is $22,500 to $30,000 or something like this. That is included hospital cost and the cost of surrogate mothers and treatments and all these things. But they get a good amount of money that they will not get if they will take up any other occupation. Noticing their, background, education and their occupation taking ability.
Yeah, successfully. Regarding, thank you for your questions first. Regarding the results between the Vanuatu and the Solomon Islands study, yes, they were very, very similar. The results were pretty much comparable with what we'd expect. The biggest thing that changes the results would be the amount of unmet need in the country. Because, as I was saying, as unmet need increases, as met need increases, as the number of people using contraceptive services rises, the number of unmet need, the amount of unmet need we would also expect to rise. So perhaps if you replicated this study again in 5 years' time or in 10 years' time, you would see even more benefits because that unmet need would be higher and we would be meeting a greater proportion of the population. Regarding the migration and population increases in Kiribati has an effective net zero migration. They have very limited policies and agreements with other governments in the world regarding migration. I think the largest amount of Kiribati migrants are who work on ships and they return every year or every 2 years, or they travel to New Zealand under a migrant scheme. But it is very low numbers and it's effectively zero. And lastly, just regarding the progressiveness of the laws in Kiribati around contraceptives, yes, they are very contraceptive, very, very liberal in many areas. You can certainly anyone can get all contraceptives. We have a very strong IPPF member association there, and they do an incredible job. The biggest challenge for Kiribati, at least when we were doing this report, was around ordering and stockouts. They were having large amounts of stockouts, particularly of the types of commodities that people wanted to use, the injectables and the implants in particular. From what I've heard, that's certainly improving. And when I was last there, I got told they hadn't had a stock out of any of the major contraceptives in some time. So, yeah, thank you.
Thank you for two very interesting presentations. My comments are on Ms. Inuan's paper on surrogacy in India. One of our earlier studies conducted in Calcutta City, 2013, which was published last year, which more or less also agree with some of the findings based on your review, what you presented here, where the exploitation of poor women happening in a big way in a large number of these private hospitals who are involved in this surrogacy business. And most of these women are illiterate and coming from a very poor socioeconomic background. They have no idea. They were not told clearly about the terms and conditions of the surrogacy contract. They are not even able to read, and nobody is giving any information in council. And they also undergo a lot of health hazards, which is not at all documented. So most of these hospitals or the infertility clinics, the surrogacy work is done mostly in a very clandestine manner, and they are also very much reluctant to provide any information about how they are done. And there are a lot of agents and brokers who bring these poor women to the hospitals. Though hospitals charge very high, particularly from the foreign clients, around $20,000. Ultimately, the surrogate woman is only getting, according to our study, around $2,000 to $4,000. So the major chunk is going to the hospitals and their patients. But partly to answer to your question, with a lot of criticism of this surrogacy happening in India and exploitation of women and the concerns raised by women's groups and civil societies, now the government of India has tabled a new act, the new assisted reproductive technology regulation bill. It is tabled in Parliament. It will come up for discussion this year. If it is passed, and more likely to be passed, the surrogacy industry will undergo major change. Number one, government is telling surrogacy will be only allowed to Indian couples. Foreigners will not be allowed. And there are so many other restrictions. So the Indian surrogacy business is more like a big booming industry now in India by the private hospitals and clinics. That is going to change drastically. And most of these clinics essentially catering to the foreigners. And that is going to stop. And government is also coming out with the more and more restrictions that a woman can only have one surrogate child. Now that restriction is not there. There are so many other things. Only the married couples can only come for the asking for a surrogate child, and many other restrictions. So because of the concerns expressed by NGOs, women's groups, and I think the new bill, which is now tabled in the Parliament, will have, if it is passed, and will have more restrictions on the surrogacy industry. And I think it will be a big blow to the business of surrogacy that is happening, the rural tourism happening in India. And I'm not sure whether the religion is an important role of selecting the surrogate mothers. Our study found that is essentially the poverty, nothing else, which is making this woman to go. And most of these, we keep in mind that they are not even informing their own close relatives and others. Sometimes they disappear, they are working as a housemaid in a city, but they were staying somewhere else and they are in the pregnancy stage. So they are not even providing or even giving that information to even their close family members. Of course, in most cases husbands are involved, but otherwise other relatives are not. So mostly it is a very clandestine business happening in India. Now with the government regulations, it will be more coming with the rights of this surrogate woman will be protected, and the extent of their exploitation may be coming to certain, it may reduce to a certain extent. That is the feeling we have. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for the presentations. My question is about the study of US, and which are the data you get yourself to insert into this model to be able to get these results, and how did you manage to get them? And the second question, I think, is to actually everyone in this room, because I feel that these studies like these are very convincing, but it's really all about the next step. When you present the study to the government, is there actually going to be a change in budget? And I would be very interested to know if there's any organizations here that have perhaps positive outcomes of advocacy around the policy, but mostly the budgeting, and if there's possibility to do budget tracking of reproductive health and family planning in particular in the government budgets, and how do you gain access to it? I'd be interested to learn more about experiences from others.
Okay.
I think it might be a last question. Yeah.
First, I'd like to congratulate and thank you for this presentation. Basically, when I was seeing the theme of this, conversation, that is models of health financing, so I was just wondering actually to see the different kinds of models of this, health financing, whatever it is. So this is my first question to the presentation on this surrogacy and surrogacy women. So I was just thinking about the scenario that a lady is renting her home and taking money, and if that lady experienced a kind of miscarriage, then what happens to that lady? So this is one. Second question is, what about the social support that ladies or that women are getting? Are they supported by their family, the community, and others? This is what. This is to you. To Jacob particularly, I know that you have presented a kind of cost-benefit analysis. So just I was wondering to know about the results behind the low CPR per lead 18%, 28%, sorry. So what are the different reasons of this low CPR? And also, I would like to know about the total health expenditure in terms of family planning, no? For expenditure, and who is contributing to those kind of expenditure? Is it the government? Is it the NGOs? Is it the, bilateral donors? Thank you.
What I understood from your question is that means if the woman is accidentally the miscarriage happens, then what happens to her? Means who takes care of that part? You wanted to ask that? Okay, actually during the contract, at every stage of this pregnancy, the woman is paid. Means she is not paid at last. Means the whole amount. It is paid in different parts, like first 3 months, then next 3 months and all. Suppose if the miscarriage happens, then it's the responsibility of the hospital only where all these things were taking place. But maybe she will not get the full payment that she would have got if she would have delivered a baby. And regarding the social support, many of the surrogate mothers get the social support from their husband, and as per my sir also said that whenever they take up surrogacy, they are cut from the society. They live in a hostel, and only close relatives or people, maybe those who support her, know about that surrogacy part. Else they disappear from the society for that 9 or 10 months, and nobody knows about that. But most of the studies I have found that husband is supporting surrogate, maybe because she is getting a good amount of money back home.
Thank you both for your questions. I'll go in the order they came. In regards to what data was needed for this research, I think from memory it was about 120 demographic and health indicators we had to plug into the software system. Many of them were quite hard to get. Many of them involved us looking through clinical data and clinical records that were kept at the Ministry of Health. Some of the data points were not very good, or we didn't think they were as good as they could be. And some of these indicators, because of the low population, are a little bit problematic. Things like maternal mortality ratios or rates. There's when it's per 100,000 women and there are maybe 50,000 women in Kiribati, 30,000 of reproductive age, it's a problematic indicator. Yeah, so there were many points. Where we got the rest of them actually came from mainly from censuses and the raw data from the censuses. We were very lucky to get a lot of help from a couple of the ministries in Kiribati regarding collecting some of that data. I think we were very lucky to get the data that we did get. Regarding a change in budget and actually allocating funds, this was funded by the New Zealand aid program, and they worked very closely with the Kiribati government, and it was the New Zealand aid program that approached us, I believe, to do the work. I'm afraid I wasn't involved in that. And as it's still ongoing, I'm not sure what the future holds for getting this included into the budget, and I'd love to hear from the audience about how they go about getting increases in funding for family planning from governments. So the next question, if I was right in understanding your first question, it was asking why there is low contraceptive prevalence in Kiribati. There are many reasons. You've actually asked at a good time. We're currently doing a study on that at the moment, looking at what the barriers to contraceptive uptake are, particularly among young people. That's ongoing at the moment. What we expect to find, or what we have heard in the past, is there are the main barriers are around accessibility, particularly in terms of transport around the island, open hours, things like that. Confidentiality in clinics, people be embarrassed asking for services. Religion plays a part. It's a very religious country, and there are probably some barriers around that. And lastly, the commodities, which I alluded to. Certainly when we were doing this study, the commodities were an issue, and they were having women would turn up to the clinic wanting to get an injectable. They were out of injectables, so they were sent home with oral contraceptives. And in Kiribati, oral contraceptive prevalence is very low. It's not something that women wish to take, and lots of reasons around regularity and remembering to take the pill and things like that. And also having to carry around your contraceptive as opposed to having it hidden. Lastly, who pays for family planning in Kiribati? It's split between several sources. The commodities come from UNFPA. The commodities, the Kiribati government has an agreement with UNFPA by which UNFPA provides commodities at low cost or free of charge. I'm not sure how it currently is. The Ministry of Health pays for staff time and buildings, and the Kiribati Family Health Association pays for their staff time and their buildings. The International Planned Parenthood Foundation, IPPF, also provides a small amount of money to the Kiribati Family Health Association for commodities. So it's split between multiple sources. And certainly some of the financial burden does rely on the government, which we try to address in this report. So, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Jacob. So let me wrap up the two speakers. So first, Anu, thank you very much. At your presentation, we understand that demographic and socio-economic profile of the surrogates in India. So there's a lot of papers, and there is a meta-analysis. So almost all our surrogates are married, and at least one biological child, and 80% is the 2 or 4 children. So it should be a future research like the perspectives of the surrogates. And so our discussion is it should be for the rights of the surrogate mothers, the restriction, regulation, laws of guidelines should be there. So this is a very interesting study because in Myanmar we don't have any surrogate studies at all. So for the Jacob studies, he identified the cost and health and socio-economic benefits of reducing unmet needs. So it assists to advocates for the increased funding of the family planning and also assists government to set the goal for the reproductive health and resource and contribute the evidence family planning. So it costs $807,000 US. So the benefits could be for the health, so it averts maternal and infant death, and for the economic benefits, so the planned pregnancy should be a higher education and so work opportunities. Yeah. And for the demographic dividends, so it reduces dependency ratio and increase economic growth, and also saving the health and education. So for the environmental benefits, the population becomes lesser, and so if there is unmet need, is constant. So regarding your recommendations, we agree that the long-term financial commitments that invest to your Kiribati, and also prioritize for the family planning among the RMNC age and population policy. And that's right, the health management information system should be strengthened. So would you like to add some more, Dr. Ali?
No, I think you have summed up all the discussions. So I'd just like to say thank you to all the presenters today, Jacob and Sinu, and also my co-chair, and also the reporters, and all of you for participating actively in this discussion. So thank you very much.
Certainly.